All right.
Namaste everyone. Welcome to this evening's Filter Coffee with Nilesh Neelkant Oak Ji. Welcome, sir, for the Veranda Club. Uh,
Namaskar.
Namaskar, Namaste. A brief introduction about Nilesh Ji and over to Nilesh Ji on his journey on Itihasa and decisive dating of the Mahabharata. Nilesh Ji helps individuals become aware of the deep wisdom and antiquity of Indian civilization so that they truly comprehend and present and defend, protect, preserve, and promote our civilization and the grand narrative that the great land Bharat has to offer. He builds it through scientific acumen and logical reasoning. Nilesh holds a bachelor's and master's in chemical engineering and an executive MBA. He has written 3 books on the dating of Indian Itihasa. A lot of his videos on YouTube on the dating of Itihasa have done fabulously well, watched by over lakhs of people. Very interesting. And of course, true to our Bharatiya sense, some of it is debatable, which is welcome. Welcome, sir. I will just start with how you got introduced. I mean, what interested you to this journey on research on Bharatiya Itihasa and how you ventured into the Mahabharata saga and what is your journey, sir? We'd like to know.
Right. Yeah, no, good question. Namaskar to everyone. Growing up, I would say the kind of scenario I had would not be very different from many of you or many of the listeners. Which is to say, growing up in a small village rather, and I consider myself extremely fortunate that I got to spend my first 15 years of life in a small village. Okay, now I have lived more years of my life in outside India, North America, than I spent in India. But people will still tell me when I visit India, they said, Nilesh, you still speak your English like a village English. Now I don't know if they're giving me a compliment or mocking me. Either way, it doesn't matter. But I consider myself extremely fortunate that I got to spend that time in the village. But to answer your question, I saw like two extreme viewpoints. Like either I would hear that our narratives, our shastras, I'm using the word ancient Indian narratives in a very generic sense, everything, all our grantha, fall into that, everything, not just limited to Sanskrit language. So people would just say, well, you know what, there is nothing in it. I mean, if we had it, then how come we did not invent the light bulb or the aeroplanes or electricity, I mean, steam engine, on and on, like, hey, we claim we had the knowledge. That's one extreme. So it is useless, it's worthless, it's not worth spending your time. And then there was the other extreme, that everything is there in our ancient Indian narratives. And so me in the middle, you can say, I just thought, okay, well, I need to explore these viewpoints. And I think that comes from your maybe Purva Janma, like everyone has a different attitude to what you hear. And so I wanted to explore, but it was a small village. I said, where do I start? Like, so when people say everything is there in our narratives, or somebody says there is nothing, it's all useless. These two groups seem to know everything, but where is that? And it's a small village that I had, like people say it's in the Vedas. I say, well, where are the Vedas? And actually, I couldn't find a copy of a Veda in the village I lived, in spite of a wonderful place it is. But Bhagavad Gita is what I have my hands on. And so that started my interest. And I said, well, I need to find the answers for myself. I think that was the curiosity, that was the jidnyasa that took me to this. And so my study started with Bhagavad Gita. Eventually, it led to Mahabharata, because Bhagavad Gita is part of Mahabharata. And I was looking for something else actually connected with Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, I was exploring Mahabharata. And I ran into something that totally fascinated me. I said, I mean, this doesn't make sense based on my limited knowledge of astronomy. That's going back 25, 30 years. And I said, well, I need to figure this out for myself if this is true. And fast forward to 25, 30 years, and here I am. That's how I got into Itihasa.
Wonderful, sir. Wonderful. So the study of Mahabharata and the epics, that's how you got into, sir.
That is correct. Bhagavad Gita and therefore Mahabharata, and that's how into Itihasa.
Very inspiring, sir. So you may elaborate on your findings, research on the dating of the Mahabharata war.
Right. So I thought for our filter coffee session, I'll pick one subject. Although I will talk about the decisive dating of a Mahabharat time and therefore Mahabharat war, what we will find is that the principles that are used are applicable to everything, not just to understand our Itihasa, but frankly, anything, any knowledge, any knowledge. I mean, I'm not distinguishing between Jnana and Vijnana. Anything, whether it is a confusion, whether it is a sangshay, whether we want to know more, I think the method is very identical. I call it doubt clearing machine. Let me start sharing a presentation. So just for the benefit of the listeners, I'll go for about 40 minutes. Then I'll stop. And then if we have a time, we can go into a question answer session. Okay. All right. So with your permission.
Perfect, sir. Perfect. Please.
I would like to share a presentation. Oh, all right. So here it is. Okay. So a decisive dating of the Mahabharat war. I'm going to give you the answer to everyone right away. So now people should think, okay, how did he arrive at that? 5561 BCE, more than 7,500 years ago. To be precise, if you want to know, all you have to do is simple arithmetic, 5561 plus 2023, the current year. And what is that? 7,583, 84, those many years ago. You cannot separate Mahabharata from Krishna. So I thought, the Krishna's photograph would be very appropriate. Now, in terms of my exercise to actually study this or figure this out, metaphorically, how can we relate to that? Now, depending on your background, you may think of it in terms of a particular metaphor, a particular comparison, simile, upaman. I'll give you a couple. For example, those people from engineering and operations research background, they may think of this as an optimization problem. Okay. Now, Mahabharata text is like what? 100,000, like 1 lakh plus verses. Okay. Descriptions of all kinds. And from that, we have to extract the information to determine different aspects of Mahabharata, like when, where, why, what, all that kind of thing. So if you are familiar with, say, optimization problem, and one method is like, say, linear programming, say you have to optimize in 2 dimensions, like 2 constraints, x1, x2, 2 factors, and some additional constraints you may have. And based on that, you will define that as a feasible region. For example, as soon as we say Mahabharata is Itihasa, immediately we know it is something that happened in the past, Itihasa. This is how it happened. So it's in the past, which means we have to go not in the future, but we have to go in the past. That's like one constraint. There may be some other constraint. For example, those people who are familiar, of course, knowledgeable about Indian narratives, they would know that it was after Ramayana. Now, whether we know the timing of Ramayana is a different issue, but we would definitely say, hey, it has to be after Ramayana. That gives another constraints, and so on. So those lines that you are saying, think of these as various constraints. Based on that, and based on the evidence descriptions of the Mahabharata text, we can come up with possibly a answer or maybe multiple answers. And there is a reason for multiple answers, because maybe we have not taken into account all the constraints. Maybe we have not taken into account a right methodology to follow. But if we do it, just like in this case, suppose our goal is to, I'm just talking of a linear programming problem. Let's say that our goal is to maximize whatever that is, let's say in this direction of the arrow, and these could be all acceptable, or I would say a factual solutions. Somebody calculated this, but we would say this is the optimum solution, the decisive solution, the final solution, the optimum solution. That's what we would look at. This is one way of looking at it, say optimization problem. And if we get into a discussion, question, answer, I'll say why we have to look at it as an optimization problem and not like a one single solution, because some people may look at it. For most of us either are into jigsaw puzzle, we're playing with our children, we ourselves as a child, we have played with jigsaw puzzles, we have played with crossword puzzles. Even as grown-ups, we do it. Many people do it every day in the newspaper. And how do we do it? In jigsaw puzzle, there are visual clues, how the shapes look. In crossword puzzle, there are verbal clues. And I want you to think of this puzzle of finding when did the Mahabharata war happen as a combination of a jigsaw and a crossword puzzle, because there are visual clues that we have to understand from the evidence that we see, whether it's a celestial evidence or terrestrial evidence. And we have to also, there is a clues that are coming from the Mahabharata descriptions, which means we have to understand the different manuscripts of Mahabharata text, because we are not sure exactly which one is the right one. There is a Southern edition, there is a Bhandarkar Oriental, which has got collected hundreds of different manuscripts. Then for a given shlok, there is always a Pathaved because of these different manuscripts and so on. How do we understand that? That's like a crossword puzzle. So, think of this as a combination. Now, this is what I call the doubt clearing machine. In modern science, Sir Karl Popper defines this. If you look at the central portion, you'll see both Sanskrit words and English words. The Sanskrit words, the English first. So Sir Karl Popper says the logic of scientific method or logic of scientific discovery is what? It's a triangulation, the central triangle of explanation, prediction, testing, evidence, prediction, and testing in the context of a theory at the top, in the context of the background knowledge. That's the 5-point formula. Now, if you look at, say, our Darshana Shastra, how to look at the things, how to analyze things, how to comprehend things, comprehend the world around us. That's what darshan is, like literally seeing, viewing, understanding, comprehending. Nyaya Darshana will say Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Shabda Pramanani. You can see the words. Or Patanjali Yoga Sutra will say Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama Pramanani. They mean the same thing in a different context, slight changes. And if you look at the 16 elements of Nyaya Darshana, you will see Prameya, Prayojana, Samshaya, Drishtanta, Siddhanta, Avayava, Tarka, Nirnaya, Vada. And it goes into the bad things also that people don't understand, but they still do. Jalpa, Vitanda, Hetva, Bhasa, Chala, Jati, Nigrahasthana, where the person is declared as defeated, declared as stupid, declared as ignorant, and so on and so forth. Okay. So now suppose if we have to use this in the context of a Mahabharata dating, what is our goal? Our goal is, this is only goal for those if you want to know when it happened. I mentioned that because some people will say, actually many people say, and I think if it's an individual choice, then that's perfectly fine. Somebody says, I don't want to know this. It's like, I don't want to watch that movie. And that's perfectly understandable. On the other hand, if somebody wants to know it, once you understand it's a itihasa, it's a historical event, then it has a dating. Whether we would able to find out or not, that's a different issue. And our goal, at least, our objective, prayojan at least, is to find the precise and accurate. We may be successful, we may not be successful. Now, if you read Mahabharata, and most of us like to read Mahabharata, most of us have read Mahabharata, including Bhagavad Gita. At a minimum, I would say, most of us have read Bhagavad Gita in some form. And if you have not, then you should start reading right there. Right in Bhagavad Gita, you will also see, there was the Brahma, Manu, and Manu's Putra, and Ikshvaku, and how the knowledge came to our times and so on. Similarly, the Mahabharata, if you read Mahabharata text, we'll limit ourselves to Mahabharata today, but that's true for all our ancient narratives. We have genealogies, this person was the son of this king, and this person's son was so and so. We see these genealogies in Mahabharata, we see these genealogies in our narratives. Maybe that can be used to find out when the Mahabharata war happened. With our science, modern science, we say last 500 plus years of modern science. We have a geology evidence, geophysics, geochemistry evidence, hydrology evidence, the river science. Maybe that can be used. Well, it can be actually used. The thing is, I found that it will not give you a precise and accurate answer. Maybe sometime it will give you an approximate answer. And still you are not, I felt that I cannot be confident because there could be many other things happening. What about oceanography? And what's the connection of oceanography? Connection of oceanography is with flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka 36 years after the Mahabharata war. That's what Mahabharata text tells us. But until I know when the Mahabharata war happened, I may not be able to use the oceanography evidence. Same thing with climatology. There are many different disciplines of science. Now, the recent one is genetics, like especially I would say last 35, 40 years, tremendous progress into this discipline of genetics, amazing stuff. And I have a data, we may not have a time to actually go through it, but if we get into question answer, I can go through that. Physical anthropology data, this is like a 50, 60 years old data, beautifully supporting 5561 BC. The recent genetics data, not more than 10-year-old, supporting 5561 BC. I'm going to talk about astronomy. I'll come back to that. Now, people also ask, oh, but what about archaeology? And, you know, this is like a frequently asked question. And every time I just have a smile and smirk and go into laughter. Well, what is archaeology? Archaeology is a study of the past. That's all it means. And how do we study? Well, we study with anything that is at our disposal and anything that can be explored with the latest in science and technology. I mean, latest with our knowledge, whatever we are capable, able, that's how we do it. Everything that you see on this page above that archaeology is actually archaeology. When you're looking, maybe not genealogy for a second, but geology, geophysics, oceanography, climatology, genetics, astronomy, and there are 20 other disciplines of science you can think of, paleontology, paleobotany, on and on, okay? That's all archaeology. So it's very important to understand when people ask, oh, where is archaeology evidence? Guys, this is archaeology, okay? Epigraphy. Now people will, we have lots of epigraph and people look at the epigraph and say, well, that epigraph says Mahabharata war happened so and so. Now, we don't have even a single epigraph that distinctly says Mahabharata war happened here. So there are interpretations involved, but suppose even if there was a epigraph that distinctly said, hey, that this temple was built 5,222 years after the Mahabharata war happened. And somehow we can figure out exactly when that temple was built. We have to still understand this is like a statement of a person, of that king, or maybe the advisor that the king had. And king must have asked, hey, when did the Mahabharata war happen? The advisor said, according to my understanding, it happened 5,228 years ago. So they just wrote that. So at the end of the day, it is a statement. It's a shabda. It still needs an independent validation. Where do we do the validation from? We have to go back to Mahabharata. Again, this is a common sense. If we are trying to figure out something about Mahabharata, we have to go to Mahabharata. If we are trying to figure out something about Ramayana from a Aitihasic point of view, historical point of view, we have to go to Valmiki Ramayana, not any Ramayana, Valmiki Ramayana. If it's a Mahabharata, not any Mahabharata, the Vyasa's Mahabharata. Now, of course, multiple manuscripts of it and so on, that's fair. So I'm going to focus on the astronomy, and somebody will, of course, ask why astronomy, and I'm going to answer that too. But if we are going to use astronomy, one thing is because astronomy evidence exists in Mahabharata. Suppose I want to do something based on some particular discipline of science, like say paleontology, and decide when Mahabharata war happened. There has to be a paleontology type of data in the Mahabharata text. If it is not, tough luck. Luckily, related to astronomy, Mahabharata is filled with astronomy descriptions, especially in the context of the Mahabharata war. So in order to decide or solve the problem of when, remember that doubt clearing machine, this is how one would go about filling it. So astronomy descriptions of Mahabharata text are of Mahabharata times. This is my guess, guys, okay? Just because I say it doesn't mean it is true. This is exactly what we want to test. That's how any scientific investigation begins. The beauty is, if you have got the statement right, everything else falls beautifully. Astronomy descriptions of Mahabharata. Astronomy descriptions of Mahabharata text is our evidence. If you can mute that person, thank you. And as soon as you have the statement of a theory, then what kind of background knowledge you need also becomes very obvious. Okay, naturally you need the Mahabharata text, or if there are multiple manuscripts, then you need multiple manuscripts. You need the knowledge, knowledge of Sanskrit, okay? Different understanding Pataved, some strategy or some standardization. How are you going to deal with the Pataved? Translations, standardization. If there are multiple translations, how are you going to go about using which translation you select? Okay, then a certain science and technology that is available to you. Are you going to do the mathematical calculations by hand, by computers? Do you trust the computers you are using? Are you going to use astronomy simulations? On and on. Now, we are trying to figure out something that happened a long time ago, okay, encoded in a Sanskrit language. We are trying to figure this out with the modern science and technology, like astronomy software, astronomy catalogs, the data of latitudes, longitudes, right ascension, declination. So therefore, we need a knowledge of Indian astronomy, but we also need a knowledge of modern astronomy, knowledge of Sanskrit, knowledge of the Mahabharata itself. But once we have that, we are ready to go and actually test it in an objective fashion. Now, people may ask, why astronomy? Quickly, the availability of a crucial evidence. The crucial evidence is the kind, like, in my introduction, I said, when I was reading Mahabharata in the context of Bhagavad Gita and something outside Bhagavad Gita, but within Mahabharata, I ran into something that just totally shocked me. Okay, and I'm going to quickly describe that. Now, that is the kind of crucial evidence which we think impossible with our modern knowledge. Okay. But it is stated in place like Mahabharata. And now that becomes a crucial evidence that allows us to create a crucial experiment and something that we think impossible. And that's how many of our Mahabharata researchers of last 100+ years have said about that particular observation. They said, this is impossible in the very order of nature, astronomy speak. This is impossible based on our modern science and so on and so forth. But Vyasadeva is saying it, that this is exactly what is happening at the time of Mahabharata. And imagine if we can show with our modern science that actually what Vyasadeva said is indeed true, which we think it's impossible. That makes it a crucial evidence. That makes it a crucial description. It allows us to do a crucial experiment. And if we can actually successfully solve it, the finding is crucial. It's a decisive finding. That's what I mean by the decisive evidence. And this happened not just with this one observation, but it happened with 300+ observations. But just to answer the question, why astronomy? One thing was because such a crucial observation existed. It's also important to understand in the modern science speak, the astronomy is the most successful theory, the successful theory of modern science. Not many people may know that. All the famous names that you hear, directly or indirectly, right from quantum mechanics to Newton's gravity to all the way, they are all connected with astronomy. They were trying to solve the problem of astronomy, our planets, right? As simple as that. It is also a well-developed discipline in Indian civilization. Very deep, guys, extremely deep. That's not a subject, but it goes back to thousands and thousands of years in the past. Okay, you can listen to my other talks, or not just my talks. You can listen to talks of Rupa Bhattiji, Arun Narayananji's papers. There are many folks, like Lokmanya Tirak going back to 130 years and so on. Also, you will not surprisingly, numerous existing efforts in the, say, last 400+ years to date the Mahabharata, more than 50% used astronomy for exactly the reasons that I am stating here. The evidence is objectively testable either by mathematical calculations, now with astronomy simulations. Okay, as I said, it has an intrinsic ability to provide precise answers. The answers could be wrong. Don't get me wrong. The answer can be wrong, but it will be precise. That's the beauty of astronomy. That is not possible with any other discipline of science, exceptions none. Okay, the kind of precision we are looking for in this case, like a precise year of the Mahabharata war, for example. It's also tamper-proof evidence. Now, people may play games with the multiple manuscripts, Pataved, interpretation, translations. Yeah, but there is a limit to it. I mean, how many multiple translations can exist from a particular verse, even with a Pataved? Maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a finite number. Now pick any of this. Now you want to show that for 300+ evidence that you have to bring this together as a parts of jigsaw puzzle or a crossword puzzle. There is a limit how much tampering you can do with the positions of the stars and positions of the planets. Okay, because you physically cannot go there. People may say, I want to use this formula versus that formula. I want to use this software versus that software. Yeah, now you have to explain why you think this is better than the other. In that sense, it's extremely tamper-proof. Okay, and the very fact all that rich 300 plus evidence exists right in the text of Mahabharata is a unified and internal evidence. Okay, from a point of view of consistency of it. So let's begin with that first doubt. Remember, I showed you the doubt clearing machine. Some basic common sense rules of the game, like, anytime we have a meeting, we say ground rules. Yeah, I mean, if you are trying to figure out Mahabharata, when did the Mahabharata war happen or something about Mahabharata, you may look at other grantha. No, nothing wrong with that. But for heaven's sake, if it's about Mahabharata, start with the Mahabharata. That's common sense. Okay. Now, Mahabharata is, as lucky us, right? That's my other talk. You can see why we are so lucky, why only India has Itihasa. I'll not go into that unless we get into question answer session. 300 plus astronomy evidence, 100 plus descriptions of river Saraswati, which does not exist today. Okay, but it's there at the time of Mahabharata in a flux. I'll not elaborate on that. And then there are descriptions. I have not explored everything, but Mahabharata has descriptions that actually some of them we cannot even study or test with our current science and technology. Like, say, for example, Shastra and Astra, especially Astra, Narayanastra and Brahmastra and Parjanyastra and Agniastra. All we read is a description. We don't know how to test it. Or say Pushpak Vimana for Ramayana, right? We don't know how to test it. Now we can, because now we have the aeroplanes, but let's move on. So if we want to actually find the decisive evidence, we have to find something where you hit a dead spot. Okay, like climbing the mountain, or something like this. There is a saying, wherever you stumble, there lies your treasure, something like that. So really find problems and then find true problems, real problems, try to solve them. This was that in the introduction when you asked me the question, like, how did I got into it? This is how I got into what now I have done in the last 25 plus years. Okay, so this was in Canada about 1994-95 sometime. I went to the library, the Indian section, and I was going through the Bhandarkar Oriental section, looking for just my personal curiosity, a very casual curiosity, nothing interest specific, like where exactly Bhagavad Gita occurs in the Mahabharata text. So I knew it is in the Bhishma Parva. So I pulled the big, thick Bhishma Parva. And I said, let me figure it out. Now I know the verses of Bhagavad Gita, like Dhritarashtra Uvacha, Dharmakshetre, Kurukshetre, Samaveta, Yuyutsava. Okay, I know that. So I'm looking for that, but I don't know where to look. So I start with the first chapter, second chapter, third chapter. And by the way, the answer is like, it's a 23rd chapter, that's the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. But I didn't know that then. But I didn't go that far. The first chapter, second chapter, third chapter is like the discussion happening just before the war. And Vyasadeva is describing to Dhritarashtra many different observations of that time. And there he says to Dhritarashtra that Rajas is to Dhritarashtra. He says, Ya Chaisha Vishruta Rajas Trailokya Sadhu Sammata Arundhati Tayapesha Vasishta Prushtata Ruta. Now this fascinated me. Like, this is, oh my God, do you know why it fascinated me? Even to be fascinated, you have to have some background knowledge. Now, I knew who the Arundhati was and Vasishta was in the context of astronomy, because these are all astronomy observations there, that in the second and third chapter that Vyasadeva is describing to Dhritarashtra. And he says, Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishta. And I was shocked, surprised. I said, I'm from my 6th grade, when I was like 10-year-old, I'm watching Arundhati Vasishta. My teacher, his last name is Nidar, from Karnataka. He started teaching me astronomy. Okay. And so he used to show me always the Arundhati Vasishta, right from their time, and who is walking ahead and so on. This is like, going back to the 6th grade. And so I said, well, he always told me and he showed me and we used to watch it. Vasishta is walking ahead. And Vyasadeva is saying Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishta. I said, wow. And I knew a decent astronomy, by the way, but to quickly fast forward this. So this is how the scenario is today. Okay. At night, again, you have to know the basics of astronomy. I will not waste time on that. At night, if you look at it today, Vasishta is going to walk ahead. Arundhati will walk behind. As you see, they go around, or they appear to go around the North Pole. 24 hours at night, doesn't matter when you watch it, anytime you can see them. Vasishta is ahead, Arundhati is behind. Now, after spending 15 years, now in 1995, I thought I'm going to solve this problem in a week or so, maybe a weekend. I went to one mathematics professor, who also understood astronomy, Indian professor. And anyways, that's a long story. But it took me 15 years. It is that long, from 1995 to 2009. Finally, when I solved it. And that's how I'm telling you now that if you go back from today, for last 6,500 years, it's Vasishta who is walking ahead of Arundhati. But Vyasadeva is saying at the time of Mahabharata war, it is Arundhati who is walking ahead of Vasishta. Let me fast forward the story. Think of this as a problem. That's how we have to formulate. Like Einstein, the quote is attributed to Einstein, where supposedly he has said, if he has not, still the point is valid. If you have a 1 hour to do whatever, spend first 45 minutes in understanding, defining the problem, and then spend last 10 minutes, 15 minutes in solving it. Okay, so now we have to understand what is that Arundhati Vasishta problem, why it is a problem, why it is a big deal, why it is a crucial evidence, okay, or crucial claim of Vyasadeva in this case. And then you use that doubt clearing machine. I just put it like as a tripod, as a coffee table with the 3 legs, which is the triangulation of explanation, prediction, testing, background knowledge, and then final conclusion, Anumana. This is the Anumana. I'll show you on the next page. Essentially, what my 15 years of work showed. Please mute the person. For 15 years, when I'm saying I was doing work for 15 years, I was failing repeatedly for 15 years. I want you to understand that. And then finally, the success. What it showed is that essentially, Vasishta is ahead of Arundhati if you go back from our times in backwards for last 6,500 years. But then there is a time period interval from 11,000 to 11,000 BC, that 13,000 years ago, to about 7,000 years ago, or 7,000, 6,500 years ago, when actually Arundhati could be seen walking ahead of Vasishta like this. And I'm just showing this to you for 5561 because that's the year of Mahabharata war. I'm going to explain how I arrived at that. So essentially, this is the answer. Okay, so the blue line is my conclusion in 2009. Now, this is how the science should progress. Okay, in an Indian context, there is no difference between Jnana and Vijnana. There is no difference between Vijnana and Adhyatma. Okay, Adhyatma is a refined Vijnana. Vijnana is a refined Adhyatma, and they go hand in hand and they make progress. Okay, so that blue thing that I did showed that time period of 6,000 plus years. That was 2009. Just a few years ago, 10 years after my work, when Siddhartha Chabra, he of Indian origin, living in America, he said, well, let me test if what Nilesh is saying makes sense. Is he saying? And he did this again, tested this again with the latest data. And actually, he validated what I was saying. And he came up with even a narrower interval. So instead of this 6,500 years, now it's like a 5,000 year interval. What does that say? Anything after, Mahabharata war cannot happen, would not have happened, has not happened anytime after 4636 BCE. That's the value of a crucial evidence, okay, as opposed to a generic evidence. And I'll show you how the generic evidence is also useful. Now, the beauty is if you have a theory, right, the theory, correct theory, or you are on the right path, it should able to predict new problems of higher complexity. So, just because I said, oh, the Mahabharata war happened sometime between these 2 dates, am I done? No. Now I got a bigger problem to find the specific year between that 5,000 year time interval. So it makes it tougher, okay, of higher complexity. But also one more thing, if you're on the right path, then, so it's like solving a jigsaw puzzle. Once you got few, say you're solving the map of India or say United States, you got few states right, at least the border states, the border of that, then everything else starts falling in place. Isn't that the same thing with the crossword puzzle? Once you got a couple of words right, then you start getting the clues for remaining clues. It's like that. If you're on the right path, if you've got the first clue right or the second clue right and third clue right, then quickly it solves the problem. Okay, it's something like that. And that's exactly what happened. So, okay, I know the year is somewhere between that 5,000 year period. Now I have to decide the specific year, the specific month, the specific day. And you know what? Again, then we make use of our traditional knowledge, the knowledge from the Mahabharata text, but also from what we hear. Now, number of you, I don't know if every one of you, but number of you would know that we celebrate Gita Jayanti on a Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi. Or many would know that the Mahabharat war happened during the month of Margashirsha. Okay, now what is the evidence? And what is the first day? There are some confusion, like was it the day of Amavasya or was it the day of Ekadashi? You would have heard that. And if you go and read everything that was done before me, last 400 years of stuff, again, we have no time to go through that details. You will find that there are multiple starting points, but predominantly two starting points, the Amavasya and Ekadashi. To this day, I'll tell you, as a tradition, we accept it, which is great. That's sometimes sufficient for our purposes of celebration and whatnot. But no Mahabharata researcher, until I figured out the first day of the war. Now, people have assumed Kartika Amavasya. Okay, Kartika Bahula Amavasya is the first day. You'll see that in many books. But when I asked those researchers, how did you arrive at that conclusion? They said, well, that's what our tradition believes. Actually, I'll tell you, there is sufficient evidence in the Mahabharata text. If you look at the phases and positions of the moon through the 18 days of the war, see those circular things are the 18 days of the war. This first 10 day, Bhishma was the military general of Kaurava army. Next 5 days, Drona was the military general. Next 2 days, Karna. And then 1 day, half a day, you can say Shalya, until he was killed on the 18th day. And I also have a data for 1 day after. So I put this the 19th day, because there is a data on the phases and positions of the moon. But, I mean, this is like, okay, what do I make of this? Well, these are specific references from Mahabharata text, but picture is worth 1,000 words. So I'm going to take you to this picture right away. Essentially, summary is the first 7 days of the Mahabharata war. There are no descriptions of the moon, hardly any descriptions, Beginning with the 8th day to all the way remaining days of the war, and even after, you have descriptions of the moon, but now something more interesting, especially after the 12th day, okay? From the 12th day until the war ended, and even a day after, there is a galore of full moon descriptions everywhere. Now, what does that tell you? First 7 days, no descriptions. Beginning 8th day, there is a description of the moon. Beginning 12th day through the remaining days of the war, there are full moon, full moon, full moon. And guess what? When you come to this 15th, 16th, 17th day, there is a full moon description galore. Okay, you can see that. You can read my book, blogs, my other talks. But something else. So that tells me that maybe it began on the Amavasya and it followed through the Shukla Paksha. But how do we know the month? Well, there are descriptions of the positions, like 12th day, the full moon like moon near Kritika. On the 17th day, full moon like moon near Punarvasu. And now we already know some additional information. I'll fast forward through that. Like we know that the Kartik full moon has already gone by. We have some additional constraints. Remember, we talked about the constraints in a linear programming. That tells us that this was also the month of Margashirsha. How beautiful. So now we know Kartik Amavasya was the first day. It was the month of Margashirsha. Just one, and then I'm done. Just 5 more minutes. Now you look at, say, the duration of Bhishma. That's another problem. I'll not take you deep into it, but just to quickly walk you through that. If I ask this question, if it was interactive, and if I had time, we don't, so I'm not going to make this interactive. But if I ask you the question, try to answer in your mind. How long Bhishma was on the bed of arrows, okay, from the 10th day of the war until the day of winter solstice? Many people may not know the answer, but those who may know the answer, and if they have not read Mahabharata or my work, they are going to answer 58 days. And that is a wrong answer. That 58 is actually there here. That reference is actually here. But if you read Mahabharata, right, beginning with the Udyoga Parva all the way to as far as you want to go to, Ashwamedha Parva, of course, the Shanti Parva, all of that, these are some references, 3, 6, 23, 60, 100. There is no dearth of evidence. It will tell you decisively, no ifs, no buts, that Bhishma was on the bed of arrows from the 10th day of the war to the day of winter solstice for at least 95 days, or definitely more than 95 days. Okay. These are the references. Some key references I have shown there. Because of the time, I'm not going to read through them or explain them. If you have a time in question answer, we can go through that. Now, What's the big deal? Like, somebody says, hey, okay, Nilesh, I get it, but 58 days, hey, let Bhishma be happy, or 95 plus days. Yeah, in general, for celebration purpose has no implication, but for a itihasa has a huge implication. Just I want to give you a flavor of the excitement that I had trying to figure this out. Remember today, like in the south, the Tamil Nadu, you have that Margashirsha, however you say it, the Magazi festival. That happens in December right now, The Margashirsha in our times coincides with the time of winter solstice, 21st December. But remember, Margashirsha was the month of the Mahabharat war, when the Mahabharat war actually began, Kartik Amavasya when it began, and the first full half of Margashirsha plus couple of days of Margashirsha in the second half, that was the time of Mahabharat war. But from that Margashirsha, now Bhishma from the 10th day was on the bed of arrows for 95 days, which means what? From the day of winter solstice, the Margashirsha must be away from it by 95 days, and actually even more, because the 10th day was when Bhishma fell down. So add 10 more days. So Margashirsha month must be more than 105 days removed from the day of winter solstice. Today it is right at winter solstice. Now, if you want to understand, this is a wonderful, astronomy is time in an Indian tradition. And Vyasadeva or Valmiki, they have embedded enough references, even Ramayana also, but that's not a subject today. So if you want to understand the shift of Margashirsha from 105 days removed of the Mahabharat times to today, where it coincides with winter solstice, you need to understand a very simple basics of astronomy, the precession of the Earth's axis or equinoxes. If you read those 4 bullets, it will walk you there. I'll just give you the summary. So there is a shift of a lunar month with respect to the seasons every 2000 years by about 1 month. Now today, Margashirsha is aligning with winter solstice. We have to go back 105 plus days, which means what? 30 days, 1 month. So 30, 60, 90, 120. About 120 days we have to go back. We have to make a shift of it. 2000 years it takes for 1 month shift, 30-day shift. So 2000 times 4 approximately, that's 8,000. Mahabharat war happened about 8,000 years ago. Now you start seeing the beauty. What Arundhati Vasishtha observation gave me the time bracket. Now Bhishma Nirvana is giving me another time bracket. Do they match? Absolutely. Bhishma Nirvana is telling me that the Mahabharat war happened sometime after 7000 BC, before 4700 BC. I can add, fine-tune this, refine it with the additional information from Mahabharata text, the Margashirsha, the first half of Margashirsha, the Tithi, Paksha, Masa, Rutu, these descriptions are there. It gives me a 1500-year time period from like 5000 BC to 6500 BC, where I should be looking for the year of Mahabharat war. Now, still, I haven't answered the question. I'm going to answer that in the next 3 minutes. How do I figure out even from that 1500-year time period? So remember, Arundhati Vasishtha gave me 6000 years time period. Siddhartha Chabra came and helped me using Arundhati Vasishtha, refine it to 5000 years. Bhishma Nirvana evidence gave me about like whatever that time is, like 2000, 3000 years time period. If I refine it further, I get 1500 years. Still, it's a huge challenge. Out of 1500 years, how do I nail down to 1 year? The planetary evidence, there are some 50 plus descriptions of planets. By planets, I mean Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and of course, Sun, Moon. And now, of course, we know Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. I'll not even go into that discussion in this short time. All these descriptions of the 5 visible planets to the naked eye plus Sun and a Moon, and we don't need all of them. We actually, out of 50, we need like a 3 or 4. But of course, all others must also match. And that's what exactly I have shown. You can refer to my other talks. We don't have a time to go through that. But when you go through all these references, this is how, by the way, the astronomy reference looks like, if somebody is like curious. This is how it reads. Dhruvam prajulito ghora pasavya pravartate chitra swatyantare chaiva dishtitah parusho graha vakranu vakram krutvam cha shravane pavaka prabha brahma rashi samavrutta lohitango vyavastita. Every single line there is telling you astronomy, position of a planet, of grahas, conjunctions, right at the time of the Mahabharat war. Samvastrasthainancho graha prajulito ubhav vishakayo samipasto brahaspati shanishcharo. what the Brospati and Shanishchara are doing near Vishakha for a year by becoming bright and becoming steady. They are going retrograde near that. Shukra Proshtapade Purve Samaraya Vishampate Uttaretu Parikramya Sahita Pratyudikshite. Venus is going retrograde near Purva Bhadrapada. I mean, all on and on. There are like a 50 plus such descriptions. If we summarize them like as a Vakri motions, I get 3 references. If I do retrograde, I get 5 references. If I look at 7 planets attacking the moon, 7 planets going away from the sun, 7 planets near sun, I get 3 references. Akramya for multiple positions, Pidyate. Now we have to not only look at the descriptions and matching them for a specific year, we have to also look at the consistency of explanation. If I look at the word Akramya for multiple planets, I am explaining in the consistent fashion. If I look at the word Vakri, am I explaining in the consistent fashion? What about retrograde? Are the descriptions consistent? Pidyate, there are descriptions of Pida, like Sun and Moon giving Pida to Rohini, Saturn giving Pida to Rohini, Jupiter giving Pida to Rohini after sunset on the 17th day of the war. Can I show that Jupiter is giving Pida to Rohini after sunset on the 17th day of the war in a consistent fashion? The way Saturn is giving Pida to Rohini, or consistent fashion, the Sun and Moon are giving Pida to Rohini on the first day. That's what I have to look at. What about the retrograde motions? Are those descriptions consistent? What about the Vakri motions? Twice for Mars, once for Jupiter. Can I explain that in a consistent fashion? When you do that, by the way, conjunctions, multiple conjunctions for 50 plus evidence, eclipses, and many other motions, guys, phases and positions of the moon, on and on. Basically, it takes you to 5561 BCE. Okay, those of you who are not aware of my work, the books, but also people, sometimes get tired of reading the books, and my books are technical books. You can listen to the talks if you're interested. This is on my channel, YouTube channel, but just like I'm giving a talk here on a Veranda Club, you will see the talks everywhere, Sattology, and I don't want to just name few because my talks are everywhere, frankly, 1,000 plus different talks, but what else? Sangam talks, Jaipur dialogues, on and on. Okay, so you can look at that. Quickly, I'm done. Now that the good thing about having a doubt clearing machine, having a standardized approach to solving problem, like think of this as that doubt clearing machine, a sturdy 3-leg tool, is that if you're on a right path. I mean, just having the doubt clearing machine is not sufficient. You have to have a Vyasakrupa, the lucky, the right evidence, right science, right technology at your disposal to actually have an ability to test it. And of course, the Kripa, nothing happens without the Kripa. You can keep on staring at the evidence forever. And I have done that. Like Bhishma Nirvana evidence, I was staring for 6 months. I didn't know what to do with it, because I was staring only at that 58 days that everyone was saying. And I said, well, this doesn't make sense. I took to the Tapasya. I started reading Mahabharata, right from the Udyoga Parva to Ashrama Vasika Parva. I read multiple times looking for every single reference related to Bhishma Nirvana. And I showed you what the outcome was. But if you have a sturdy 3-leg tool, you can just keep on piling so much stuff on it and it practically never breaks. So because of time limit, I'm going to stop here. I just showed you astronomy evidence, but we don't have to limit to astronomy evidence. You can think of any discipline of science. If the evidence exists and the evidence is such that we have an ability to connect it back to 5561 time frame, time and time again, no exceptions, I have shown that all the evidence matches for 5561 BCE. I'm going to stop here because of time, but just to show you some of the scientific disciplines or other areas, other texts that I have connected with Mahabharata dating. For example, say Ramayana, genealogies of kings and sages, even the Rigveda descriptions, Rigveda chronology, travel records of outsiders visiting India and what they wrote about the Indian genealogy, hydrology data, paleontology data, archaeology data from other fields like genetics, climatology, oceanography, physical anthropology, on and on. It all, if the data exists and you can connect the dots, meaning it can go back as far as 6th millennium BC, it can be shown beautifully matching with Mahabharata descriptions. Okay, quick summary. So Mahabharata war happened 5561 BCE, flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka. Remember I said 36 years after the Mahabharata war. So if you add to that, it gives you 5525 BCE, and then tremendous evidence around the world that supports that 5525 BCE. So with that, I don't know if I went over time. My apologies if I did.
This is
Okay.
perfect. Wonderful,
All
sir.
right. Back to you, sir.
Thoroughly a scientific approach, and I think it's a triangulation approach you have used to decipher maximum accuracy. Sir, recently you tweeted on Poompuhar also. I think Dwaraka and Poompuhar went down at the same time underwater.
Okay, great question. Let me answer that in a different way. Actually, one of the incident that affected Poompuhar port, or one of the Poompuhar port, is coincident with the flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka in 5525 BCE. But otherwise, Poompuhar has 7 different ports, meaning 3 ports are now inside the water, 3 ports are on the ground, and 1 port is the today's Poompuhar port, or the Poompuhar ocean line, seashore line. Because when the water was rising, that the ports that are now under the ocean, under the water right now, seawater, they were destroyed. They built another port inland, and then after the third time, that's the time of the flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka. The ingressing of water was so much that not only it destroyed the Poompuhar port number 3, but the water ingressed inside all the way to like a 10-15 kilometers to Mayuram. Okay, the place called Mayuram. And for the next 2000 years, Mayuram was a port because water was there. And this is a work of Dr. Ramaswamy. Yeah. Now I don't have a graphs ready, or I may have them. Yeah. Mayuram, or the new name is, it's like something similar, but like a Thalam or something like that. You can just type Mayuram, just west of Poompuhar, like 10 kilometers. You'll see that on the map.
Yes. Fantastic, sir. So quickly, we'll open the audience for questions. I think Sonaliji had a question. Sonaliji, you might ask, you can unmute yourself, open up your video if you want, ask a question to Nilesh ji. She has, I think, posted the questions once again.
Okay.
Chat box.
Yeah. Okay. So I can read it. Do you want me to read it and answer?
Yes, sir. 1 second.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see it.
Yeah. Sonaliji is asking, would love to see the evidence of the eclipse during Jayadratha here, if you could please, sir. Thank you.
Okay, good. So now this is a good question for multiple different reasons. For example, the question, Sonaliji, the question she's asking, it assumes that there was an eclipse when Jayadratha was killed. Okay, I want to respond to that by saying there is zero evidence in the Mahabharata text, zero, to say that there was an eclipse when Jayadratha was killed. There was no eclipse on the day when Jayadratha was killed. It was the day of about Trayodashi, Chaturdashi, Shukla, Margashirsha, Shukla Trayodashi, Shukla Chaturdashi. And in the, so 13-day Abhimanyu was killed. And now Arjuna said, by the end of the next day before sunset, I'm going to kill Jayadratha. And he actually goes on to do that. There is only description you will see is that Krishna used Yogamaya. And I would encourage everyone to present here, but everyone who will be listening to this to actually go to the Mahabharata text and read the descriptions of the 14 days of the Mahabharata war. Okay, so the way Krishna did Yogamaya, for simplicity, I'm saying think of this as some hypnotism or a selective hypnotism, where all the other Kaurava warriors saw as if there is a sunset, and therefore they said, okay, let me stop the war, and they left. But Jayadratha was still seeing the sun, and Jayadratha kept on seeing sun. His other friends are leaving. He's kind of scared, and Krishna tells Arjun, okay, here is a Jayadratha, kill him. And you can read the description. Krishna uses Yogamaya. That is the word that is used. Other than that, there is zero evidence. In fact, there was a lunar eclipse the next day. Okay, on the 15th day of the war. Remember, Kartik Amavasya is when the war began. And she didn't mention solar eclipse, but in a way, she's referring to solar eclipse because that's all of us think, like, Krishna put Sudarshan Chakra and that must be a solar eclipse and all that. There is no solar eclipse on a Purnima day, which the Jayadratha killing was very close to Purnima day, and the Amavasya day was not anywhere close to Jayadratha's killing. And anyways, there was no eclipse of any kind on a Jayadratha. I don't know of any Mahabharata researcher out of 100 plus who says there was an eclipse. And even if there is someone, they are wrong. There is no reference, no evidence. Thank you.
So, Ilango sir has a question. Where can we get your talks on Pumbuhar dates?
Okay, so I mean, you definitely listen to my talks. They will be on my channel, like a Nilesh Oak channel name, and look for the series which says Dr. No Shorts. Now, they are not always shorts, by the way. They can go for 40 minutes and 1 hour, sometimes 20 minutes. You can listen to that, but also type Dr. Ramaswamy, Ramasamy, and you might have to play with the spelling. That is his original research work. I am simply using that. Okay, using that work. And amazing work by Dr. Ramaswamy. He has written papers and he has also given presentations. Now, whoever is asking the question, if you understand Tamil, great. But if you don't, I will tell you, when Dr. Ramaswamy, and if you know the subject, he's speaking sometime in Tamil, sometime in English in his presentation, and still I could understand 90% of what he's saying. Okay, so definitely listen to it, even if you don't understand Tamil, which I don't, by the way, So.
So Prasad Raghavan has a question. Possible to put a date on when Vedas were written? Is it possible?
Okay, very good question. Again, I say good question. I'm not just saying to praise somebody, because, before, remember Einstein's alleged quote that I said, like, if you have a 1 hour, spend 40-50 minutes defining the question and maybe 10 minutes answering the question. Just like what Sonali ji asked, like to Prasadji's question, Raghavanji's question is similar. Possible to put a date on when Vedas were written. First thing, Vedas. So which Veda? Are you talking Rigveda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, Atharva Veda? Then we need to understand that are they composed at the same time? See, these are the revelations, okay? These are the revelations of different sages over different times that were finally categorized or put together in some form. They were always existed, but in some form by Vedavyasa. If you read Mahabharata Adi Parva, it says Vedavyasa compiled them, classified them, and, for the humanity, he saw some signs that, maybe people would not follow the oral tradition for long. So let me just put them in a certain form. And so therefore, what we have today, based on my understanding, that they were compiled meaning it put form in some form, and there might be some changes by Vyasa's disciples, but about 7,500 years ago at the time of Mahabharata. But as to the actual revelation, composition of those particular sukta, let's just take Rigveda. You will find, please listen to my talks on Rigveda, the essence of Vedas, and many others. But you may read books by, listen to Rupa Bhattiji, but also talks by Srikant Talagiriji, Srikant Talagiriji's work, David Frawley's, the Vamadev Shastri's work. I mean, you have to listen to all of that and come to your own conclusion. All I can tell you is that definitely some of the references in Rigveda, they were not written as a history or for historical purposes. But guess what? When you write something, in a way, the history gets embedded. Suppose if I'm writing something, just telling somebody that I ate pav bhaji yesterday, somebody reading it 5,000 years down the road will know that how far old I can go, because there was a time when pav bhaji as a dish did not exist. So although I'm not saying historical information, the historical information is there. Similarly, when we look at the descriptions of river Saraswati or some other descriptions, what we can tell is that definitely some portions of Rigveda are more than 24,000 years old. Now, that's my original work that I can refer to, but more than 24,000 years. But how old? I truly don't know. I am not sure if there is anyone who exactly can tell with that precision, just like I could tell about Mahabharata or Ramayana. I don't know that for Vedas. Long answer, guys, Prasadji, but the reason I gave that is the time is needed to be spent on refining the question, defining the question before answering it. Otherwise, the answer gets misunderstood. Thank you.
Fantastic, sir. Any questions, audience?
All right.
So very soon we'd like to have one more session on the dating of the Itihasa and Vedas with you.
Sure.
Probably we'll have a series itself, sir, monthly one, depending on your convenience. It's a great honor to have you, sir. Thank you so much for honoring us and accepting to be on our platform. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. My pleasure. And greetings to everyone. Thank you for joining. And thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you, sir. Namaskar. Thank you. Pranam.
Namaskar.
Namaskar, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.